Okay, Ultraman Rube. Finally starting on recaps and opinionations of its plot with this show. Um, as I'm recording this, the 13th episode has aired, and I'm recapping like 2 or 3 of these at a time until I catch up. Reason why it took me so long to actually come back to this is it wasn't about fan translations or anything like that. I was busy with other things. And I honestly had wanted to wait until Subaraya had officially imported the show since, well, they've been doing that and Subaraya needs the monetary support from all those kinds of things. And I've been watching the rest of the franchises. They've been going up on Crunchyroll. I've been buying the DVDs. Considering those were licensed through Chayo, I have no idea if Subaraya actually gets kickback from that. But yeah, I've been trying to support Subaraya through official channels for the most part, and it looks like that their official importation of Ultraman Rube is not coming anytime soon. So here I am. It was honestly, it was ended up being a conversation with Mars Girl and one of her tweet threads, on the subject of the Segi no Yusha, or hero and ally of justice. That incidentally ended up tying into some of the things Ultraman Rube was doing in the mid-season a couple weeks back that made me decide that, yeah, I should probably catch up with the series and what it's been doing thus far. So to recap from when I reviewed the first episode a couple months ago, the brothers Kitsumi and Isamu live in Ayaka Town and, from an incident, end up acquiring the powers of 2 Ultraman, Rosso or Blue, who crashed down and scattered their essence in their region in the midst of a brawl against a monster centuries ago. This ties into the subplot about their missing mother, as she was a space archaeologist. I always assume with that phrase that she studies meteorites and asteroids and cosmic phenomena as they impact the Earth. I'm sick, by the way. And how this might be tied into why their mom has gone missing, and how Katsumi has ended up giving up a lot to basically look after the family. So he gets irritated at their goofy gooberness, which you can't really blame him about wanting to be responsible, wanting them to be responsible. Episode 4 actually gets into a bit on why that is. I'll get to it in turn. But now that the siblings have gotten these powers, episode 2 starts off with them trying them out. Now, I'm gonna say the thing that I really don't care for with this series is the slapstick. I'm gonna admit this is more a personal choice thing, and not about the way they're using it, as is commonly the problem over at Toei with their use of slapstick. Their use of slapstick that interferes with a more serious story they're trying to tell and often ruins the more serious story. No, in this case, it's situationally appropriate slapstick, as Katsumi and Isamu... is it Isami or Isamu? I'm new to a show when I can't remember the names. Yeah, it's Isami. I'm not certain why they went with M-I. I am so used to the name Isamu in this. But regardless, Isami is like... it feels like he's had too many sugary products, as he always seems kind of hyperactive and energetic, and that kind of plays against how he was originally introduced as a researcher. But then again, that just might be his eccentricism, where that he can spend all this active time on things he's passionate about, and now that he's gained these science fiction-y based powers, he's excited and lively about learning how to use them appropriately. And the slapstick, of course, comes from how neither of them knows a thing a single thing about how to use their powers. So, beginning of the episode, it's them trying them out and trying to figure out all the abilities they have. And this complements well I shouldn't say complements well, but makes it so that we don't know what we're doing slapstick of their first battle, which I was of a split opinion on. I believe I was a bit more negative about it when I recapped, but I rewatched the first episode, and yeah, it's more forgivable because they don't know what they're doing. And this is different than how other Ultra series have acted, in that usually when the human bonds with an Ultra, they have some idea of what to do because the Ultra they bonded with is guiding them, or it's the full Ultra that's in control in the case of 7 and, at times, 0. So you've never really had a situation where they're going in completely blind and don't know how to use their abilities. It's different, and it works with them as characters, as how they're acting is an extension of the characterization we have seen from both of them. Katsumi being the responsible one that thinks about the consequences of their actions and they're playing out, while Isami is willing to explore and needs someone to drag him back. In fact, it complements they complement each other well, as Isami is also working to drag Katsumi out of his ruts and not be the super responsible surrogate mother figure for the family that he's been driven into, again, because their mom's been missing for 15 years. So yeah, it works well in that Isami's, I don't want to say spastic, but not energetic livelihood either. What am I trying to say with this? His passion for figuring out all these powers is why they do understandably learn the base Ultraman power set. Flying, shooting energy blasts, their strength and agility despite being really, really large, and also that they are operating off of a time limit for their powers before they are forced out of the Ultraman forms. I'm actually surprised that the way they use the limit here is they lose the transformation entirely, when usually with Ultraman powers, once they hit the time limit, they die. So if they're being transformed into Ultraman, but the full Ultraman power set isn't there, then that might explain it, because in the cutaways we see to the original Rosso and Blue in the battle that brought them to Earth, their essences were scattered into the Ultra Crystal transformation trinket of the series. So it might be possible that they actually died, and these crystals are all that remain of their powers and what they were, and thus Katsumi and Isami recollecting the crystals over the series might be the keys to returning them to life, or making them the true inheritors of their powers, or maybe they're just laying dormant, and the limitations of what remains of their powers is allowing Katsumi and Isami not to suffer that backlash that is one of the hallmarks to the Ultra Power set. I'm just speculating en masse here because, again, I'm only 4 episodes in at this point. But regardless, yeah, this better explained the slapsticky nature of the first battle and got it out of their system. So Katsumi and Isami could get to the part in the story where they have to figure out what kind of hero they want to be. And of course, Katsumi wants to play to the standard tropes about keeping this secret, being responsible about their powers, because if another monster shows up, then they need to be prepared to fight them off. Well, Isami wants to seriously share this discovery and these powers with the world, like, get some of the credit for the deeds they've done. And it's not completely out there that something this massive for someone who's researching all of this, him wanting to share it is understandable, but Katsumi nonetheless is looking out for his brother and by proxy his family in pulling Isami back from the edge, and Isami gets really angry about that because he doesn't think that Katsumi is being not being that Katsumi is actually caring about anyone aside from themselves, despite them having the duty to be heroes. And it's a case where I think they were trying to go for how both sides are right and both sides are wrong, but I honestly feel that Kasumi had the better point in that if they're going to keep doing this, there needs to be not exactly a secret kept, but they need to be careful who they trust with that secret. Going back to the old standby cliches of the superhero, where, yeah, it's been discarded a lot depending on which series you're going for. It waffles between one or the other, but I think for this setting, and considering that Rosso, Blue, and the original monster they're facing, which has also created a bunch of kaiju crystals that are creating the antagonists of the series, I think it's better for them to take a step back and only tell those they can trust if they need to actually bring it up, and not actually go out of their way to tell people. And this is more or less proven by how next monster attack, Isami gets in trouble because he ends up trapped in the debris because he was trying to go it alone and not really thinking through his actions. It put their younger sister Mio in... No, sorry, Mio's the mother. Their younger sister Asahi in danger because it's like Katsumi got in his head. So there needed to be a line drawn where they should trust these people, and this is proof why that is, but also the responsibility they have is so big that, big in multiple ways, both the size of the conflict and the devastation they can bring down simply by not being careful and hitting the things with hitting everything with collateral damage. That was also a big thing in Ultraman G and a few other of the Ultra series I've gotten a chance to watch and look through. So, Isami's big thing, is he gets trapped under debris and can't reach his transformation trinket. But this also reveals another aspect of them in that the Rube Gyros, I believe they're called, can allow them to connect to each other through a brother kind of bond, so Katsumi can come to his rescue, and Asi and Katsumi both drag him out of the wreckage. And I think the idea of what they were going for here was to settle Isami's I don't want to say, well, yeah, it is recklessness, but it was recklessness with a direction, and I don't feel recklessness is the right word for it, considering he was doing the right thing, and the only reason he didn't contact Katsumi for backup and everything was he was just angry at his brother, and it was something that was realistic and mostly rational. Brothers fight. Brothers have differing viewpoints, different experiences. And it was a credit to Katsumi as well here. I really think Katsumi is the best character in the show right now. I really do. That the second the monster came onto the scene, that the first thought between him and his father Ushio was find where their siblings are and get everyone to safety. That was the first thing they went and did. And because of that, Katsumi was close enough that when the Rube Gyro's second connection took over and allowed him to see where his siblings were, that he was able to make it in time to save them, and thus allow them to defeat another monster. Something I'm a bit on the fence about is how Rube seems to be using form change and just its different color palettes for the costumes, as episode 2 is when they first use it, and they do it to switch Rosso to Aqua Elemental form, which is just a reshading palette swap of his standard outfit, and the same thing for Ultraman Blue to Flame form, which, in contrast to his name, turns him red. I don't really have an issue with this in principle, because a lot of Ultraman have had form change that it's just a different rebalancing of the colors of their costume. I didn't have much of an issue with Ultraman Tiga doing it. Same with Ultraman Dyna. Jeed was but stuff like Jeed, Ginga, and Orb, and a few of the other more recent Ultra series have gone a bit more elaborate with their designs and differences between the different forms. So, considering that Subaraya has been pretty heavily bought out by Bandai, and Bandai are the ones that are kind of crazy about Toyota gimmicks and gadgets and transformation trinkets, and thus Ultraman has had a lot of that in the shows lately, I was expecting something more elaborate. So I don't want to say I'm disappointed, as it's the standard level of restraint I have seen of the older Subaraya series when they've made use of that concept. But on the other hand, you know, like, I'm crazy about the form change gimmick. It is one of the things that came from the early 2000s. Well, okay, you can date it back to Black RX and whatnot. I really like seeing contrasting forms having a different overarching design to them that, like, references what they end up wanting for it, and just, I like how the show immediately says that the two brothers are more adept at certain forms due to their personality. Isami is a bad fit to the flame form because he doesn't have the kind of restraint and control that's needed to properly wield fire, whereas recklessly controlled water, you just splash people, and that's not as bad a thing. Water help, and in a way, can see that water would help him in building his control to possibly better wield fire later. I like that contrast with how they're using the forms. It's just, I don't know. Something's off about how simplistic it is and yet detailed, because there's a lot of detail put into those suits, and yet it seems like it's underselling them in how the form changes just seem to be a color palette swap. I don't even know why that bugs me so, considering, like, all of the Mega Man style changes from Mega Man Battle Networks 2 and 3, again, considering I've been reviewing the Battle Network series intermittently the last few years, pretty much did the same thing, where the color of them is all the elemental differences it has between any of the other forms. I think it's because I've become so used to form change having more distinctions to it that it just feels off to me, and that's not a detractor to that's not something that the show is doing wrong. That's just me having this expectation that is unfair to apply to it, and I fully admit that. But regardless, I do like narratively how they've been using them thus far in these first 4 episodes. Well, they only started using form change in the second episode, so I can't count the pilot, the first episode of that. But nonetheless, yeah, it works, and kind of it works to calm Isami down. It works to get Katsumi a bit more out of, like, caring only for them, as they both have to take up the duties to protect the world. Third episode then is a big lore dump, as Katsumi and Isami learn from their mom's journal that their father Ushio had drug out in the last attack, that the Ultra Crystals that they used to transform were drawn as pictures in their mother's research journal, meaning she might have known something about it, and thus, relatedly, the researchers and partners in her research exploits must know something. And so they go to contact research and technology conglomerate Aizen Tech head Makoto Aizen. Now, I have not been following the show, so rephrase. I have seen spoilers for the show, but with my general trend of being able to predict story points from commonalities of other media I've watched, yeah, I could tell straight out that Makoto Aizen was going to end up being a bad guy, and they do seed it well, as the only hints of him being a bad guy are, well, okay, they give it away very early in the show, so whoops. But, yeah, he's collecting the kaiju crystals. They first present him as doing that at the end of episode 3, after this big expedition jump about him and the technological conglomerate he's built in the city that makes it pretty much the foremost employer. He's pretty much... I can't believe I'm making this comparison, but he's pretty much in how should I phrase this? A emotive, eccentric, and socially magnanimous version of Seto Kaiba, which of course more provides the contrast, in that Seto is cold and controlled but actually cares about people, whereas Makoto Aizen, he's hamming up an act, and thus comes off as very phony in how much he overdoes everything. And it's like, I can admit I really enjoyed seeing him ham up and chew the scenery, because I figured what was going on pretty early with this, and he was overcompensating to make him appear as if he was more harmless than he is, and not malicious at all. And that kind of duplicitous overzealousness is certainly something I've seen before in real life, as opposed to fictional works where it's actually more rare because it's more difficult to pull off, ironically. The charisma thing is kind of touch and go when you're trying to write a villain that doesn't want to give away that he's a villain. But yeah, the episode is pretty much focused around establishing him and the relationship he had to the siblings' mom, and how he's also hunting down the Ultra and Kaiju crystals that were scattered from the Ultra Brothers and the original monster they were fighting 1,300 years ago. And I like how they pace this out a lot, as it's not just rushing from point to point so they could get to the Monster Brawl, and the Monster Brawl doesn't start until very late into the episode either. So they definitely give it the time to explain these story points as they need it, as opposed to, yeah, I'm not going to say it specifically, but a number of Toei series entirely rush the backstory, so they have to go back and fill in the gaps with cement to not make it seem like a more fragile series. I could name names. I'm not saying specifically the two currently running series, but a lot of Toei series have ended up doing this. Instead of giving a flat explanation that then is the next seed point for where the backstory is going to go. It's like, it doesn't give us all the answers. It doesn't need to give us all the answers. It just needs to build a proper foundation with which to then build more queries about this setting, which is going to be part of the larger story arc, instead of just tossing together haphazardly and see if it'll actually build a bigger puzzle. So yeah, their mom went missing after their research progressed to a certain point, and trying to find her on all fronts, both Aizen's and the siblings' father, failed for who knows what reasons at this point. I know where it's going. Again, I am still 8 episodes. Actually, I think I'm about 10, not a full 10 episodes, but close to 10 episodes behind at this point. So I know there's going to be more exposition about this coming up because it's only a 25 episode series. So, you know, half over, they should have been touching on this a bit throughout this. I am very interested about the mother plot, though, as it's a different take than I'm used to seeing about the absentee parent thing. Because with Ushio, the entire family, aside from Katsumi, are goofy goobers, but Ushio, to me, feels like a mix between someone that has legitimate grief for his wife's loss, and yet his own eccentricities are what keep him mostly stable, considering he runs his own clothes making and selling business, where he does a bunch of customization work and whatnot. And Katsumi, of course, has to hold him back from ruining the clothing they're trying to sell, but nonetheless, it feels like it's a focus that's helped keep him stable for his family. I kind of ended up, as I was watching more of this, seeing something like Isshin Kurosaki from Bleach in the man, where he's definitely well-meaning, he just, like, the eccentricities have become so part of himself as a coping mechanism, and I kind of feel for the guy as a result of that. And his wife's loss, and that should hopefully be resolved more happily. Like, I have issues with both Maja Ranger and Go-Go 5, but I gotta say that a lot of the stronger moments was definitely about the same kind of family issues that the Minato family here are working through and, you know, being supportive about, especially an asset to the show, because Ultraman always has this kind of family dynamic with the characters. Like, you can the example of the whole bigger Ultra Brothers garrison, or the intimate family feeling of the various teams and organizations, or potentially when one of the members of the cast end up having a kid that are not braiding but actually act adorably, like Leto's wife and kid from G, that actually are more asset to the series than hindrance, as opposed to, again, many idiot kid plots I could lob at Toei. My ultimate point with that is that, for some reason, Tsuburaya seems to take a route that makes that what is normally a plot device about all that, which can grate on me, to definitely work for it. And again, why I probably should be looking more into the Ultra series, even though I'm not really that big a fan, is, well, I like more ground-level combat than the giant set-piece battles the Ultra franchise has as part of its primary story engine. There's just, you know, differences in execution that makes one more appealing to me, even though Ultraman, while not going as uber complex in its storytelling, is still putting out a consistent quality to it. But yeah, that episode 3 mainly focused on introducing Aizen and giving the Rube brothers the Rube Slugger, the personal weapons of the pair that can either be individual, like, claw punching daggers, or a longer blade, depending on which is given to which. Yeah, another toyetic thing from Bandai, but it makes sense considering the Ultra Sluggers that attach from their, or are created from their head crests, have been a thing since Ultra 7, if I'm remembering correctly. And for the first excuse me, I think this is the first time they've actually decided to make a toy out of those things, so I'm not going to fault them for that. That's probably something that is actually way overdue when you think about it, and because this is the 30th Ultra series show, and the show has been around since 1966. Yeah. 1960? No. I might be a year or two off. I might be counting Ultra Q, and that is the first Ultra series entry. Like, I have the Wikipedia page for it, and I'm probably thinking Ultra Q is 96, and the original Ultraman is 97. I meant 66. Okay, yeah, the Ultra Q was 66. That was what I was thinking of, and Ultraman was... Huh. That is... Yeah, I'm looking at it, and it says both series were 66. Unusual. Not neither here nor there, but... Where was I going with this? Yeah, I think I was pretty much done talking about episode 3 there. Episode 4, though, is like... As I said, I think Katsumi is the best character in the show, and I can really get behind the exasperation Katsumi feels for his family, but this is putting the shoe on the other foot with this, and addressing how he has his own eccentricities as well, relating to baseball. Now, I have seen the baseball plots done before about how he's obsessive over the game, and this takes a different angle with it, which I actually really liked, in how it's something he ended up having to give up for the sake of being the mom in his family dynamic after Mio went away. It's like, you can see him taking responsibility and wanting themselves to actually take responsibility for themselves as kind of a... I don't want to say passive-aggressive, because it's not, but it kind of feels like he lost something to himself and is coping within the same way Ushio is, in being a bit more obsessive about responsibility than the rest of his family is, because he wanted to play baseball. And I'm probably reading more into it than I should, but I think there might be a bit of lingering resentment with that. They're obviously not showing it, but with how much he got into trying to train up the team he was on for this last game for his retiring coach that was primarily responsible for the skill level he has in the game. It's like, what if he'd actually had the chance to play professionally and bring the talent that his coach nurtured to a grander scale, instead of just playing this backyard ball game where most of the rest of the team aren't actually really good, and yet he's the only one that appears to be seeing himself trying to let the coach have one final big victory before he hangs up his... What would be the relevant item for a coach to hang up? His hat, his coaching jacket, his whistle? I think it might be the whistle, but yeah, basically retire from what he's doing. And because this is something he's passionate about, the same kind of eccentricities that the rest of his family has about their own quirks takes over, and he overdoes trying to train the other members of the team so they'd actually be able to play well in this final game. And it's actually Isami and Asahi that have to drag him back from overdoing it. And this, I felt, was a good contrast, as it shows that the entire family can check themselves when when one of their numbers starts to go too far, and even Katsumi is not immune to that. It better showcases a good, healthy familial dynamic in the wake of them being a member down of it. So, yeah, that definitely worked for me. And resultantly, the coach, yeah, I just pulled up his name, Kumashiro Matsuo, when Katsumi and Isami get dragged away to battle another monster, he, from watching the battle, figures out that Katsumi is Rossio, and he happens to have the Ultra Crystals, well, more of them, in his possession, as his family's lived in Ayaka City, the region where they live, for generations, and thus these crystals that they found have been in their family for generations. And as he can see the split focus that Katsumi is under, he gives him the crystals and gratitude for everything he's been doing for him, and reminds him not just once but twice that just because this is going to be his last game doesn't mean his own not suffering, his own, I am blanking out the word I want to use, his own situation doesn't supersede that of the duty Katsumi has to help and protect people with the powers he's been given. Basically, the great power also comes with great responsibility talk, and I like that he doesn't say this just once, but has to remind Katsumi when he's going to take that moment to shirk his duties. It's both showing Katsumi as the flawed character, so he's not just, being the wizened one just because he's the elder brother that needs to keep his younger siblings in check, but no, he is a flawed man himself and needs to be checked by those around him as well, and it's done in a way that is not caustic to the character. He just had a lapse in judgment brought from him being just as passionate about something as his siblings are. And I also like the way that they deal with Kumashiro admitting that he figured it out, in that he's not exactly being dismissive of it, but trying to frame it in the sense that, I know, but I'm going to pretend I don't know, because you are doing the right thing by being these heroes of protecting people. And again, him coming to, like, metaphorically smack some sense into Katsumi to get him to go is again saying that there are more important things than a baseball game, which there are. And thus, they are now up to 5 Ultra Crystals, one of which is Ultraman Zero's, that they use to enhance the power of the Sluggers to defeat the monster. Of course, leading to Aizen claiming the crystal after he had summoned it previously. Though I don't understand the logic that's working from that. It's like, does he have to unleash their power once to allow their power to be manipulable by himself? I'm probably gonna see more of how that works in the next batch of episodes I have to watch. I'm voicing the question just to get it out there. It would probably be more appropriate to have voiced that while the series was airing and these episodes were new, instead of a bunch of people that would watch these videos and think, oh, I'm just ignorant of what's going on. It's like, no, I'm trying to not spoil myself because I'm liking what I'm seeing so far, and I'm just speculating off the top of my head on what might be coming. It's like, that's what I do. I'm curious on where he's taking this, even though I know it's ultimately going to lead into Ultraman Orb Dark with all the black synonyms in his name. Which is, when I saw the previews for that, I thought that was ludicrously hilarious. But that'll show up later when I get to those episodes. So, yeah, 4 episodes in, I'm really liking Ultraman Rube. I am avoiding the obvious what a Rube jokes because I already made them. And we'll be continuing to catch up with this series until, I'll be catching up with the series until I'm caught up. I'll probably end up contrasting it against the Jenga stuff that's starting for Garo pretty soon. At least if I can catch up fast enough. Like, Garo Kami no Kiba dropped a few weeks ago. I still have to watch that too. And, hey, it's the Halloween season, so I should probably get on that as well. But regardless, yeah, if you've not been checking out Ultraman Rube through Color Timer subs, I would suggest doing that if you're... I know, I'm way behind on this. I'm way behind in giving this recommendation again. I just really wanted to support Tsuburaya with this, and it is apparently not happening right now. So, yeah. More Ultraman Rube catch-up vlogs to come until I'm back on track with the series. I'll see y'all next time.